You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on AngryMarks.com with Peter H. and Stevie J. Find them on Twitter at HardcoreCDN and at AngryMarks. And now, for all the news, reviews, and interviews in mixed martial arts, it's time for Glove Up or Shut Up from AngryMarks.com.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. and I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
You know the Olympic swim trials are going on here right now, don't you?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're taking place at the CenturyLink, which is where they usually hold wrestling when WWE comes.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I just saw Michael Phelps win his trial. It's not like the final one where he's going all the way to the U.S. men's Olympic team, but he blew through the qualifying round by such a wide margin that it's hard to imagine he won't make it.
No, he's pretty much guaranteed to make that team for sure. And his last Olympics, I heard he's retiring at the end of the Olympics. So.
Yeah, which is also why he cut down on the number of different events that he's competing in. I think the one I just saw him do was the 200-meter butterfly.
Though, I remember we talked about MMA at the Olympics being, we talked about yay or nay before, but I'm hearing a lot of athletes are just skipping Rio entirely.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are concerned about the lack of funding that they have for the Olympics in Rio right now. That economy in Brazil is in trouble. The government is in trouble. A lot of people are afraid they're going to get the Zika virus if they go over there because the mosquito situation is totally out of control there. And it's just a lot of negativity about the Olympics in Rio right now.
Yeah, the quality of the water, the Zika virus, the city has pretty much had to get like a huge boost of money from the government. Today on the news, they said that there wasn't enough money to pay the extra police security that are supposed to be there for the Olympics. Like, they're literally out of money to pay the police. Yeah, Olympics don't need security.
No, not at all. You just let people wander in and out of the Olympic Village willy-nilly. That'll work out really well. Ask Munich about that.
Yeah, exactly. But, Stevie, we got lots of news to get to, plus we're going to break down what happened in Bellator this past weekend, and you have to start the news this week with we have to start the news, unfortunately, with another passing in the world of mixed martial arts, but this one involves a Canadian MMA fighter.
Well, he was also a UFC fighter for a little while, went 2-4 in the promotion, but did have one of the fastest knockouts in UFC history during his time there, and we are, of course, talking about Ryan Jimmo, and the thing that sucks about this is it's the second hit and run of an MMA fighter in as many months, but by no means was this an accident. He was deliberately run down from behind.
Yeah, it's a really sad story of a 32-year-old that, was taken down in one could say the prime of his life. 32 is very young to pass away.
And just over the stupidest, most idiotic of circumstances, some sort of argument in a parking lot or on a street. You can tell me the particulars because I know you broke the story to me, but apparently they got out of their cars, they argued with each other for a little bit, he turned to walk away and get back in his car, and that's when the driver in the other car ran him over.
Yeah, I'm looking at the latest news now. He was actually 34 years old. The autopsy says he died from blunt force trauma, and the police have found the truck that ran him down.
But not the driver, I take it?
Not the driver, not yet.
Okay. Michelle asked me the exact same thing. She was like, did they catch the guy? And I'm like, Peter will know better than I do because this is going on in Edmonton, and I'm not saying you're close to Edmonton, but it's in Canada and you're in Canada, so you're a little more up on it than I am.
I think our friend Ryan Pike might know more than me myself. That's just me.
Yeah, I would certainly venture to say he would have his finger on the pulse of this, and it's got to really shake him up because Jimmo was a very well-liked guy, and I don't just mean in Edmonton, but you really can't find people with bad things to say about him. I listened to Filthy Tom Lawler talk about him just this morning, and they went, when he was still in UFC, they both went on some European military goodwill tour, and he had all sorts of complimentary things to say about how nice he was, how down to earth he was, how they would still, he didn't say they were like best buds. He was pretty clear to point that out, but he was like, we'd still exchange Twitter messages now and then. We were friendly when we saw each other. He was a nice guy and he loved to entertain people. And when he said that, the first thing that flashed in my head was every Ryan Jimmo fight I've ever seen where he won, whether it was a UFC fight or an MFC fight or anywhere else, because I've been watching this guy fight for many years now. Whenever he won, he would always do the robot. And that was the very next thing that Tom Lawler said. I was like, damn, how did I know that's what he was going to talk about?
So I'm just on his Twitter right now, and his profile reads, lifelong martial artist, fighting MMA, fastest knockout owner, MMA talk show host, robot dancer, actor, Freemason, and chess player, make greatness a reality.
Yeah, he was very lively guy. He lived life to the fullest. This was not a guy who half-assed anything he did, and that's what you hear from everybody who knew him and talks about him. And just like you said to me a couple days ago, Peter, this was such a cowardly thing to do to a guy.
Absolutely.
It's the worst possible thing you could do. Is the guy's completely defenseless, walking away, and you run him over with a car. What kind of punk are you?
I really hope they find this guy, and
I don't know what the local municipal laws would be, but to me that's like first degree murder. At the very least it's vehicular manslaughter, because this was deliberate and with malice.
I think it varies province to province, but I would assume running a guy over from behind, vehicular homicide, I would say, I'm just guessing here, maybe 10 to 25 years.
I'd say he deserves at least that much, because that's 25 to 50 years of Jimmo's life that he doesn't get now. Who knows? I mean, the guy could have lived to his 80s.
Well, we won't know that.
Yeah, we'll never know that.
Say, but yeah.
It's just such bullshit. Pardon my French, but
we were talking off air about it. This is the third fighter we've lost in the past 3 months.
Yeah, and like I said, second time in 2 months we've had a hit and run. Jordan Parsons, Bellator fighter, was just 2 weeks out from having a fight in San Jose when he got run down, and now Ryan Jimmo, and of course Kimbo Slice had heart failure on June 4th, so it's just been a really weird summer when it comes to fighters dying. And not from fighting. They didn't die in a fight or in the cage, which people who are advocates for the sport always point out that nobody has died in a fight in North America. And yeah, that's true, but we've still got this unfortunate trio of deaths from people who are in the fighting world, and it just feels a little morbid right now.
Well, hopefully UFC 200 next week will bring some joy to the world of mixed martial arts as opposed to the opposite.
I hope so too, and I'm not saying that they'll do this, and I'm not expecting them to do this, but if they had a little moment to remember the fact that he was a UFC fighter for 6 fights and showed some highlights, including that record-setting or record-tying knockout that he had, that would be nice if they just took a moment to acknowledge him.
Absolutely. Thoughts and prayers to the family and friends of Ryan Jimmo.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on. Staying in Canada, UFC on Fox 21 in Vancouver. Chad Laprise wants to fight Ross Pearson. That's a pretty bold statement there.
That might be a little step up based on their respective experience, but I think it's a winnable fight. Ross Pearson is not the totally unbeatable guy we used to think that he was.
Now, take this with a grain of salt, but Eddie Alvarez thinks that Rafael Dos Anjos will break under pressure.
He's entitled to that opinion, but we'll wait till UFC Fight Night next week and find out for sure.
Yeah, you could say the guy could crack under pressure, but until you are staring at him with the door closed and the title's on the line, you know what I mean? It's one thing to say and one thing to make him crack.
And it's not even necessarily that people crack under pressure, because I think at the highest levels of MMA, you're used to pressure. Every time I ask a fighter about that in an interview, they always say that pressure makes them better, makes them sharper, makes them more focused. The difference is not that you crack under the pressure, it's that in a fight at the highest level between two extremely skilled guys, it can be over in 1 second. You don't have to crack from pressure. You can just get cracked in the face.
Exactly. Well, speaking of getting cracked in the face, well, this guy won't be doing it for a good 6 months. BJ Penn, 6-month suspension by USADA. And...
Well, that's retroactive. It goes back to March 25th.
It does, but he wants to fight GSP at UFC 205. Like, do you really want to see BJ Penn and GSP fight again, Stevie?
No, not at all.
You're like, no, I've seen that fight. I'm done. Michael Chiesa is out of his fight at UFC Fight Night 91. They're looking for a new opponent for Tony Ferguson.
Now, didn't Teixeira get his fight rebooked for UFC 202 with Rumble Johnson? Didn't I just see that on the ticker?
You did? I just, you're looking at my notes again, my friend. UFC 202 has added Anthony Johnson and Glover, and also Rick the Horror Story against the Cowboy, Donald Cerrone.
That's some quality fights. UFC 202 is getting to be quite a card.
They're stacking that card for sure. Is that the one with CM Punk?
I believe so. That's the Quicken Loans Arena card, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's him and Mickey Gall.
UFC Fight Night 92 tickets on sale in Utah. Cage side seats, Stevie, guess how much?
$50.
$150.
That's too much.
Really?
For Yair Rodriguez? Come on, man.
He's good.
I'm not paying $150 to see Yair Rodriguez. I don't care how good he is. He's not a star.
I think I found
let me put it in a way that people will understand. You and I both think Aljamain Sterling is a great fighter, right?
Absolutely.
Would you pay $150 to see Aljamain Sterling in the main event of a card?
Jeez, this be a game show. How much would I pay? For Sterling at the main event, I'd probably pay $100.
I'd go 75, maybe 100, but not 150.
About Bisping, another fighter who wants to challenge him, Anderson the Spider Silva.
Okay.
So we got Silva wanting to face Bisping, and we talked about UFC 202. They've added Carlos Condit making his return finally, fighting Damian Maia.
That's got to be considered a contender's fight.
That is a great fight. That's a fight that's worth $150, Cage said.
Yeah, I think I would grant you that one.
Let's see. Jay-Z Cavalcante is defending his title for Titan against Freddie Asino. That's Sunsao, sorry.
Is he
Lineker
related to
McDonald.
Rafaela Sunsao? Is that his brother or something?
I believe so, but I'll double check that as you wanna. I'll give you one more headline while I look that up. John Lineker is fighting. It says Lineker McDonald now is headlining UFC Fight Night 91. Tony Ferguson's new opponent is Landon Venata. As my laptop.
Well, if it's Junior Sunsao we're talking about, no, that can't be, because you said Titan, right?
Yeah, it's Freddie Assunção.
Yeah, Junior is, Rafael's older brother.
Yeah, I don't see it here. Okay, let's see, what else is there? I think the last one on my news has to do with, Mr. Rampage Jackson, which will lead into our Bellator coverage. So, do you want to talk about the story you mentioned on AngryMarks.com, or you want to go right into the Bellator review?
Well, I think talking about this story will segue into the review, so let's start with the story, because after his fight at Bellator 157, Rampage said he has a condition called hypothyroidism, where his thyroid is not working the way it's supposed to. His thyroid gland is out of whack, and he says it causes him to gain weight rapidly.
So,
This is a legitimate medical condition if he has it. And, you know, it does affect a lot of people. If your thyroid is not regulated the way it's supposed to, then you actually have to take medication every single day to deal with that. And you have to be very strict about it too. You have to take it like an hour before you even take any food.
yeah, but if this is a new medical condition, these athletes get tested every time they fight, really. No one's caught this before?
Well, it wouldn't be the kind of thing that would necessarily show up if you're checking for like hormones and heart function and testosterone levels and things like that. I don't know that unless you were looking for a thyroid condition, you would find it. You would have to specifically test for that, I would think.
Now,
it sounds like he's known about it for a while. It doesn't sound like it's anything that had to be discovered. He's talking about it like he's had the condition for a year.
So it's not a case of him trying the new mac and Cheetos from Burger King?
Well, see, you can split this any different way you want, and you can make jokes if you want to, but he was pretty clear about it on the pre-Bellator conference call that he's just not a fan of cutting weight anymore. And maybe the hypothyroidism is why he's not a fan of cutting weight, but he didn't say that during the conference call, which makes the fact that it came out since the fight was over all the more interesting. Like, he could have just said, I have a medical condition, it's hard to cut weight, and nobody would have really questioned that. Everybody would have just rolled with it.
Yeah, but do you think that he's happy the story's out there now if he wanted to keep it private?
I think if he really wanted to keep it private, it wouldn't have been on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani. That's about as public as you can go.
That's true. When it comes to a story like this, you have to, you feel bad for Rampage because obviously that's something that the older a fighter gets, if he has trouble cutting weight and adding weight, and I think him fighting at light heavy, I don't know, do you think maybe he would start fighting at heavy?
He talked about that during the MMA Hour, and he said that the only way he can see himself getting back to 205 is if he goes on a very strict diet.
But he's never missed weight, has he?
Well, I don't think you can say he missed weight for this fight because it was changed to a heavyweight fight, even though originally it was booked as a catchweight fight. But before the fight took place, it was moved up to be heavyweight.
Well, I mean, it's not like Bellator is lacking for heavyweights.
No, and if he wants to pursue a title at heavyweight, then more power to him. There's
some good fights there for heavyweight for him.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are vying for a chance at that vacant title, and they haven't announced how they're going to decide who the next champion is. So if he wants to be in that mix, then that's his call.
I have an idea. It's a little out there. Bellator should have a tournament.
Yeah. Which kind of tournament? Are we talking about, like, the Heavyweight Grand Prix in Strikeforce? Because Scott Coker knows a little something about that. Or would
something.
Or would you do it more like Bjorn Rebney did the old tournaments in the Bellator seasons of old?
Yeah, have a throwback to the seasons of old.
I don't know. That's awfully tough on fighters because you're taking 3 or 4 fights in a very short amount of time. And I mean, that's why I've actually heard...
Grand Prix wasn't?
Okay, but I've heard guys like Mike Ricci say this about tournaments. They actually prefer all the fights are in one night because if you got to go out and do it, you don't have to reset your body that many times to get prepared for it. If you just get it all over at once, it's better.
Yeah, but do you really want to have heavyweights fighting in a one-night tournament?
I don't think it's the right way to go anyway. I think you just pair off the guys that are available that want that heavyweight title and let just thin out the herd. Get your guys like Matt Mitrione and Bobby Lashley and Rampage Jackson if he's going to fight a heavyweight now, and each give them a fight with somebody else from the division, and if they all win, then eventually you've got 3 or 4 guys that are ready to vie for the title, even if it's not a tournament.
I think Mitrione has to worry about an MRI these days.
Well, yeah, why don't we just go ahead and talk about the card, since we've already tiptoed around what happened with Rampage. Let's just talk about the card.
All right, let's start at the top. Quentin Rampage Jackson against Satoshi Ishii. This fight went the distance. Split decision victory for Rampage, 29-28, 28-29.
And one judge who clearly smokes crack. The judge who scored all 3 rounds for Rampage should never be allowed to score anything ever.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
I don't know where... He couldn't even have been in the Scott Trade Center. He couldn't have been at Cage Side watching because there's no way literally no way you can watch the first round of that fight and think that Rampage won the first round.
We've seen this before, though. We've seen this before. You're gonna have, like I always say, never leave to the judges, and this is a case where Ishii, he should have, I don't know, given more in the second and third if you wanted to win this fight, but,
Okay, well, why don't we explain what you're talking about for people who haven't seen the fight? This is a case where, in the first round, Ishii was using his judo background. This is an Olympic gold medalist in judo, and he was using that background very effectively. He was hitting throws, he was taking Rampage down, he was controlling him on the ground. It was a clearly dominant first round for Ishii. There's just nothing offensively that Rampage did at any point in the first round to suggest he won it. Total domination by Ishii in the first round. Not like dominating as in beating the tar out of him, but having his way with him to the point that you just couldn't possibly score it for Rampage. But in the second and the third round, which is where you're making the case, it was a stalemate. And in a stalemate, you could almost say either guy wins. Now, Ishii was pushing Rampage into the fence, looking for the takedowns. And Rampage wasn't really doing anything about it. He'd get out of bad situations, but he wasn't engaging and he wasn't hurting Ishii with his striking. The only thing you can say is that when they were pressed into the fence and they were clinched, you could see Rampage once in a while would get off a knee. So, if you want to argue that Rampage won the second or the third round, since neither guy really did much of anything, and maybe, just maybe, Rampage did more in rounds 2 and 3, okay, fine. 29-28, I guess. But Rampage did not win that fight convincingly, and he sure as fuck did not win the first round.
Yeah. No, it's pretty sad when you watch a fight like this and you're thinking, okay, 2 rounds to 1. If you have to give the round to somebody, fine. And then, okay, 29-28, 28-29, and 30. Wait, 30? Whoa, what the fuck's going on here? Sorry, there goes our explicit rating again this week.
Yeah, this fight is gonna make me curse, cause honestly, between you and me and my own personal scorecard, I had it 29-28 Ishii.
Yeah, I believe it. I'm fine with 29-28 for either fighter in this one, but nobody had a 30-27 in this one.
You know what actually would have been a fair score?
Don't do a draw. Don't do a draw.
No, not at all. But if you made those second and third rounds a 10-10, I'd have been fine with it. If the score had been 30-29 from all 3 judges in favor of Ishii, I would have said yes.
All right, well, let's move on to the co-main event for the vacant lightweight title between Michael Chandler and Patrick Pitbull Ferrari.
This should have been the main event.
Mm-hmm.
My God. Not only was this the better fight, this was the fight that people in St. Louis actually cared about, because when Chandler came out, the roof came off the building.
Yeah, it was a pretty good pop. It was Chandler's night, against Ferrari, knocked him out 2-14.
One of the best right hands you will see all year long. And this is not a guy that normally gets knocked out. This is a guy who normally knocks out other people. Ferrari is a very durable guy. He doesn't usually get cracked this way, but Chandler hit him, and I love the fact that people have described it this way. I'm not just saying this. This is what other people have used to explain this fight. Chandler threw a punch that would have stopped a rhinoceros. It was a beautiful, textbook, perfect, right on the button right hand that just clean knocked Ferrari out cold. One shot done.
He should have stolen Regal's line saying the power of the punch.
That was the power of the punch. And in doing so, Chandler reclaims the lightweight title that was once his. He is now the champion again in Bellator.
All right, let's move on to the women's fight here. McFarlane and Ruth.
Yeah, this was a case of Alimale just decided today's my day to get a rear naked choke, and I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to keep going for it till I get it. And I'm talking about this with Paul Fontaine on Twitter during the fight, and at one point I said, "Oh my God, Rebecca Ruth just turned purple. She looked like a grape out there. This choke was on so tight that her face was changing color, and she survived and got out of it, and I don't know how, but then she made the mistake of standing up with Alimale on her back, and then that choke was really in tight when she stood up, and that was it."
Yeah, it was, when she stood up, I'm like, did the corner yell something? Like, was that her game plan? Let her take the back and then stand up and slam her? Like, what was your game plan here?
Yeah, she just had to know. Maybe she was lacking oxygen from already nearly being choked out the first time and wasn't thinking straight. But if she was thinking straight, she had to know, if I stand up with this woman on my back, that just makes it easier to get her arm under my neck.
Absolutely. And wrapping up the main card, Matt Mitrione against Carlos
Seumanutafa.
Thank you.
Now, this fight could arguably have been stopped about 2 minutes before it was, because Mitrione got creamed.
Mm-hmm.
He was just about as close to being out as you can be without the fight being waved off. But somehow, he managed to survive, managed to transition to being on top, and then he dove in with a punch when he stood up and cold knocked out Seumanutafa. So he went from nearly being out to putting his opponent out. And then immediately after the fight, they're trying to do an interview with him, and Jimmy Smith is saying all the things that interviewers say after a fight. What did you think of that, punch you landed? Take us through the fight. What did you think when you got hit? And Mitrione is just standing there literally in a daze going, I don't remember anything. I don't remember what happened. And then the very next thing they do, and I was so flabbergasted, I had to tweet about this. In the middle of him saying he can't remember the fight because he's probably got a concussion, they bring in a guy named Ollie Thompson and promote that next month in London, Mitrione is going to be fighting Thompson. And I almost said, and I kept it clean on Twitter, I almost said, are you fucking kidding me? The guy can't remember the fight he just had, and they're booking him another fight in 3 to 4 weeks.
But he has to have an MRI based on the medical
Well,
suspension.
yeah, because Bellator started getting a lot of shit about that on Twitter, and they immediately backpedaled. Like, the Bellator publicist immediately put out, well, that fight's not official until he gets medically cleared. Like, you better have covered your ass by saying that, because you looked really bad booking a fight for a guy in less than a month who can't remember the fight he just fucking had.
There's a friend of mine, casual friend at my work, and asked me about Bellator. And I was like, since when do you watch Bellator? He goes, well, I watched the Mitrione fight. I'm like, that's the one fight you watched? And then, Stevie, I don't know this guy long, couple of months, right? Asked me, is there a concussion protocol in Bellator? Because he tried to make sense of the post-fight interview. And I looked at him for a second. I was like, concussion protocol in mixed martial arts.
Well, you know what? There is a concussion protocol. It's called medical suspension, because guess what? There's about 10 fighters on this card who have anywhere from a 30-day to a 90-day suspension, including the aforementioned Pitbull Frary, who is not allowed to compete for 90 days minimum. He's on an indefinite suspension, which he cannot even be cleared for 90 days. That's how hard he got hit.
Yeah, I mean, that shot was...
You'd put a bull down with that punch. You could describe it any way you want. Wow, what a punch he threw.
Alright, well, let's talk about the prelims, because there was a hell of a punch on there as well.
Oh my God. You're gonna have to help me here, because there were 10 fights in an hour, and I was covering all of them. I'm not exaggerating, people. There were fights going on simultaneously in the kickboxing ring and the Bellator cage during the prelims at the same fucking time.
Fights
in one ring would end while the other fights were going on.
That's how they were going to do it, though.
Jesus, my God, that was impossible to keep up with. And I'm trying to do live play-by-play for Mania. I was going nuts.
All right, I'm referring to the spinning back fist.
Okay, well, I remember a spinning back fist taking place after the main card in a kickboxing fight because they also had Bellator kickboxing, which I should mention you didn't even talk about the two kickboxing fights that occurred during the Spike TV main Bellator 157 broadcast, but just for the record, Kevin Ross beat Justin J-Ho Houghton by unanimous decision, and the other kickboxing fight was Gloria Paratori and Denise Kielholtz, and that was a split decision, but Paratori won with 2 out of 3 judges. So, there were 3 kickboxing fights after the main Bellator card on Bellator Kickboxing, and that one had a spinning back fist.
And if you check out Stevie's report on Mania, you could see the animated GIF showing said spinning back fist.
Yeah, okay, so here's the thing about it. Schilling and Kato, Joe Schilling and Hisaki Kato, the two guys we're talking about here, they have history before because Kato knocked him out with a Superman punch in a mixed martial arts fight. But Schilling has a way better record as a kickboxer than he does as an MMA fighter. So he challenged Kato to a rematch and said, I fought you in your world, you fight me in mine. We'll see if it goes the same way. And Kato said, why not? I'm not doing anything else right now. I'll take that challenge. So this guy had never fought kickboxing before. 6-2, 7-2, I think he's 6-2 in MMA, but 0-0 in kickboxing. And Schilling has had over 20 fights as a kickboxer and won most of them, right? So, you're thinking Schilling has the advantage because this is his style of fight. And it seems that way for the first round. These are 3-minute rounds, by the way. So for the first 3 minutes, it's all going Schilling's way. For most of the second round, it's going his way as well. He's swarming, he's attacking, he's using all sorts of kicks and setting up his kicks with strikes and just beautiful combinations, just being aggressive and intimidating. And it looks like he's in every way winning the fight until with 1 second left to go in the second round. 1 second left. Kato hits a desperation spinning back fist, cold cock Schilling, and there's a mandatory 8 count in kickboxing to get back up, but the round's already over because it was with 1 second left, and it's just waved off at that point because he tries to sit up and he can't. He just falls right back down on his head. And they're like, okay, forget the 8 count, forget the end of the round, this fight's done, you just got knocked out.
All right, we got some more news for MMA. For this Bellator show, it did just 601,000 viewers, down 25% from the last Dynamite show. The special of Kimbo Slice that aired before, 416,000, and the kickboxing show they aired after the main event, 418,000 viewers.
Right, and we should also note, Matt Mitrione came out and did commentary for Bellator Kickboxing.
Mm-hmm.
Put on a 3-piece suit and came back out.
Alright, I got some more news and notes here. Johnny Hendricks, you can add his name to the list of fighters that wants to fight GSP.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think I want to see that one. We talked about Glover. Welterweight fight, UFC 20. Man, they're really stacking 202. I said this before. They're just adding and adding and adding. Dong Young Kim against Neil Magny.
Which Dong Young Kim? The good one or the other one?
The one that fights at welterweight.
The stun gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's 2 of them in UFC now, so you need to differentiate.
And, man, another fighter who's passed away, former Pride and UFC fighter Amar Sulev, who fought Chuck Liddell and Phil Baroni in UFC's, died at the age of 40 due to stomach cancer. He went 24-7, but hasn't fought since 2008.
Well, that's probably for health reasons. If he had stomach cancer, I'm imagining that was a very long and painful fight. So my heart goes out to him. That's not the kind of thing you want to live with or die from. That just sucks.
Now we do have a funny story that we could transition to a plug for Thursday Night AMP.
Well, let's do something funny, because we've just talked about 2 fighters in the course of an hour that are dead, so.
Technically, you could say a UFC fighter will be on the cover of a WWE video game on WWE 2K17.
Well, it's not CM Punk.
Nope, Brock Lesnar.
That's right, because he's on the UFC 200 card, fighting the Super Samoan Mark Hunt.
And just as of right now, and this obviously could change before next week, but who do you have in that fight, Stevie?
I'm not going to say until fight week. I know that Brock Lesnar is ready to go, and he's been tested probably more than any human being alive. He had like 5 USADA tests in his first 2 weeks, and seems like he's passing all his tests with flying colors. So I know he's ready to fight and willing to fight, but I don't want to make a prediction just yet, because the Super Samoan, despite what you might think is a mediocre record, if you actually break it down, he's been on some big streaks during that time, and he's been a heavyweight title contender during that time.
Yeah, but
we both agree on this one, Peter. He has one-punch knockout power. He has that, what we saw Michael Chandler do to Ferrari power. We know that the Super Samoan can do that to anybody.
Absolutely. It's, I'm not saying Lesnar has a glass jaw, because he obviously doesn't, but
we also know he doesn't like getting hit in the face. Not that anybody does, but there are some...
Pitbull does, and look what happened to him.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to say, actually, is some guys don't mind it as much as other guys do, and it can cost you.
It reminds me of the fighters who don't really kick into second or third gear until, they start seeing their own blood.
Cerrone used to be one of those guys. Cerrone would almost routinely give away the first round in a fight.
Well, Lieben was the same way too.
Yeah, well, Cerrone learned that getting a late start in his fights was costing him, and then when he went on his big run of like 7 wins in a row, that was because he finally learned to kick it into first gear before he even got to the cage.
Alright, what's on tap for Thursday Night AMP?
Well, I have the feeling that the biggest discussion point is going to be the New Japan G1 Climax, because they just announced Block A and Block B and a bunch of the key matches for the tournament coming up. So I have a feeling that Abby and Jason are just as excited about the Climax as I am, but there's always stuff going on in WWE and TNA. So whether we're as excited about that as we are with New Japan, we're still going to talk about that too.
Well, I think you're also going to talk about the Japanese tour, July 1st and 2nd.
Yeah, which has had some very interesting changes with Roman Reigns being suspended, because now Dean Ambrose is a featured player on both of those shows.
And I just did a quick check. As of right now, the odds for Hunt and Lesnar, Hunt is a -160 to Lesnar's +140.
It has flip-flopped several times, so nothing is final till fight week.
Anyways, that's going to do it for the show this week. Stevie, any other plugs you want to throw out there?
Just MMA Mania for all your news and interviews in the world of mixed martial arts, other than right here on Glove Up or Shut Up.
All right. Well, for Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening. And as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
See ya.